Good evening. My name is Tom Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of KyotoUSA, a local Berkeley-based nonprofit organization that attempts to work with local residents and local governments to assist those institutions in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. One of the best things that we can, as citizens, we can do to reduce our emissions in the city or in the region is to adopt or become a community choice aggregator. This CCA is something that many of you have probably never heard of, but tonight you're going to get a pretty good briefing on exactly what it is, how we can achieve it, and some of the issues around the pros and cons of the types of CCAs that can be established. Tonight I have with me Rafael Silberblatt, who is from Marin Clean Energy, the first and only established community choice aggregation institution in California. And on my right, I have Al Weinrub, who is the program coordinator for the local Clean Energy Alliance. And I'm just going to read you a brief bio from each. Al is, as I said, the coordinator of the local Clean Energy Alliance, the Bay Area's largest clean energy coalition. LCEA, which hosts an annual Clean Power Healthy Communities Conference, sees the development of local energy resources as the key to growing sustainable business, advancing social equity, and promoting community resilience. Al authored the highly acclaimed report, Community Power, Decentralized Renewable Energy in California, and has conducted a large number of energy policy briefings. He serves on the Sierra Club California Energy Climate Committee and is a past national officer and member of the National Writers Union, UAW Local 1981, AFL-CIO, and he lives in Oakland. Welcome, Al.
Oh, thank you very much, Tom. Glad to be here.
On my left, I have Rafael, who is Marin Clean Energy Programs program coordinator. Rafael supports local program design and implementation through community outreach, research, analysis, and data processing, program and customer-facing content development, and vendor outreach and interface. Rafael is an East Bay native who received both his undergraduate degree in comparative literature and graduate degree in landscape architecture environmental planning from UC Berkeley. Welcome to you as well, Rafael.
Thank you for having me.
So we have I feel a pretty interesting subject to discuss. There's a lot of interest in the Bay Area in forming a community choice aggregation organization. And it is can be complicated, and so we're going to try and work through some of those issues today. And I'm going to start by asking Al just to define for us what community choice aggregation, or as we call it here, community choice energy is. What is it, Al?
Yeah, well, I think it's good to start by dropping that aggregation stuff because, God, it's a horrible word and who knows what it would actually mean. But community choice really does sort of signify something real to people. First of all, it talks about community and it talks about the questions of choice. So it sort of implies something about a democratic decision making about something, and in this case, we're talking about electricity. Right now, people pay their electricity bills, they get their electricity, it all comes from PG&E in our neck of the woods. And so the question is, how would community choice be different from that situation? Well, right now, PG&E not only delivers electricity to your house, or your business or whatever, but it also decides where the electricity is going to come from, where it's going to be sourced. So it decides where the electricity is going to come from, it brings it to your house, it bills you, it services the lines, and so on and so forth. And what the community choice aggregation law said in 2002 is it provided the possibility for a city or a group of cities or a county or some jurisdiction like that to say, oh no, we'll take over the role of deciding where the electricity is going to come from. And PG&E will still bring it to the businesses and to the consumers, and do the billing and so on. So what it does is it puts the community in the role of being sort of in the driver's seat of this vehicle now. The community can say, well, here's the kind of electricity we want, and here's where it comes from. So that could mean that the community says, well, we want to go purchase electricity out on the open market. We want it to come from natural gas-fired power plants or from hydropower plants or nuclear power plants, which is all the places that PG&E gets the electricity, or we can get it from renewable energy sources, which is a lot the reason why communities have been interested in community choice energy, because given the threats of climate change and everything that's going on, people have felt, rightfully so, that it's really important to transition from fossil fuel energy and other forms of destructive energy into renewable forms of energy. So the big impetus for community choice was largely to say, well, we want, more renewable energy in our portfolio of different energy products that we're consuming. But that's not the only option. Under a community choice program, the community can also decide to build generation sources of electricity, and it can also decide to cut back on electricity consumption, which is just as good as buying something new. You just don't waste and use a bunch of stuff. So a community choice program also gives the possibility of developing a lot of local renewable resources, by which energy efficiency is a resource, and which new generation like solar panels or wind or other kinds of things are a resource. So that's basically the bottom line about community choice. It says, okay, our community can democratically decide where the electricity is going to come from, and we can exercise that in a way that's going to be best and most beneficial to our community. And we don't have to worry about maintaining the distribution system or the lines or the infrastructure or whatnot. PG&E can still take care of that. So I think, bottom line, that's what community choice energy is. It's the community choosing where electricity is going to come from.
So, Rafael, let me ask you if you'd like to add anything to that from your perspective.
I think I'll hit most of the high points. There's, I guess, the obvious thing is that it's adding competition into a marketplace that has not had competition. So, in going out and talking to communities in which, within our service territory, there's a fair number of people who are critical or skeptical, and we like to point out, you know what, even if you're not one of our customers, you're going to benefit from our being in the marketplace. You're going to benefit from having that competition. It's going to raise everybody's game. Potentially it should lower the cost of electricity, and it will. We've already seen PG&E's the percent of their renewable, the percent of their portfolio that's renewable has gone up since we came into existence. So that I think is a real bonus, regardless of whether you're our customer or not. Whether you're a CCA customer, having that competition in the marketplace is huge. That's a game changer.
Yeah, it might be just worth mentioning that, it really is competitive in this sense that a lot of people sometimes try to frame community choice as, the government coming in and sort of forcing you into this kind of a program. But it's not a choice just on the community level, but it's a choice on the individual consumer's level as well. So a community offers this program, to the people who are paying for electricity, but each ratepayer basically has the choice of saying, yes, I want to be part of this community choice program, or saying, no, I actually am in love with PG&E. There are people around like that, and so they want to stick with the old program. So it's very competitive at all points along the way in terms of trying to hold the allegiance of ratepayers. And so, it's important for a program to be able to really offer a good deal, because otherwise people will say, well, maybe it's cheaper with PG&E, or maybe it's something, or whatever is in their mind. Well, benefits are usually depend on the community that's involved. Community choice really represents just a structural rearrangement of things, in the sense that it introduces competition, and it allows a community agency, to be making decisions about how to procure electricity, whether to build it or to buy it, or so on and so forth. And in some cases, those decisions are made strictly on the basis of price points. So if you look in the Midwest, there's a lot of community choice programs now, and the reason they're in existence is because people have discovered if they go out and they take over that process, instead of paying high-priced electricity to, say, Connecticut, to one of the Edisons, they're all Edisons, say in Chicago or someplace else like that, which has these long-term contracts based on the old price of natural gas. If they set up community choice, they can go and get electricity from suppliers who have cheaper gas because it's coming from fracking natural gas wells and so on and so forth. So it's a much dirtier and much cheaper form of energy, and they're doing it just because they want cheaper energy. It's not exactly the type of thing that I think motivates people in California. There's a lot of environmental consciousness, and so the notion of doing this is for the community to really figure out, what's a real environmental and economic and possibly a social benefit in their community.
So Rafael, Al's just given us a perspective on benefits. What else could you add to that in terms of what CCA can provide?
I think a CCA reflects its constituents, which is the wonderful thing about it. In Marin, what that's meant is that for people who, for example, want to put solar on their roof, we can offer programs that increase the payback and make that a better economic proposition. And for customers who have roofs that are not suitable for solar, or who are renting, or they can also opt to join our Deep Green 100% renewable program. So they can be carbon free, essentially, at least on the electric side of their bill, for essentially an extra $5 a month for the average customer.
Yeah. So, for example, in Oakland, where there's a lot of interest in community choice, the kinds of things that are really important to folks in Oakland is the kind of economic development that can come out of a community choice program. So if community choice program says, well, what we really want to emphasize is the development of local renewable resources in our town, we get the greenhouse gas reductions, but we also get a lot of economic activity out of it. It's a big investment to be doing energy efficiency upgrades on a lot of buildings. It's a big investment to be building solar, on schools or on homes or on box stores and so on and so forth. So that means that there's economic activity. That means that there's jobs. And when you have a city like Oakland, which is in really need for employment and jobs, that's a big deal. The other thing that's really important is that for cities like Oakland, when folks pay for electricity bills, largely what happens is that there's wealth that's being taken out of the community. That means that you're paying those bills to PG&E, to the shareholders, to enriching those shareholders. It's mostly money flowing out, whereas if you develop resources in your community, you're taking a local, naturally occurring resource, you're developing it, and it's all happening in your community. So the benefit, the wealth, is accruing in your community. So what that does is it gives the community a lot of leverage. And actually, it turns out that if you can manage your own electricity system in this fashion, if you can integrate energy efficiency with new renewable energy, you can optimize the energy system in a way that, for example, PG&E has no interest in doing. And what optimizing the energy system means is it means basically reduced cost and reduced expense to serve your community. And then that advantage can be shared across the community in the form of lower electricity bills. So you get a lot of economic advantages potentially out of a community choice program if your community has those objectives in mind. Of course, you're cutting any kinds of pollution because you don't have electricity being produced through natural gas-fired power plants like the one they're trying to build in Hayward and the one out in Antioch. But really, you get that investment, you get that economic activity, you get the lower energy prices. It really can enliven the economy and make it more sustainable when you're controlling those resources. After all, electricity, like water and food, is a necessity of life. It's very important to be able to control that, and especially when you have the impacts of climate change coming down the hoop, where you have these extreme weather conditions, and we're going to be subject to them in the Bay Area as well. You have higher prices for products and whatnot because energy prices are going to go up, to the extent that the community can say, we have our own energy resources and we're saving on energy, it makes us much more resilient in the face of these climate changes. So there's a huge number of benefits that can come in addition to the types of things that Rafael was talking about. If you shape the program in that kind of fashion, then the community can really get a lot out of it.
So it's hard for me to believe that we don't have community choice aggregation districts all over the state. And I'll just give you a little bit of history of what has happened here in Berkeley. Back in 2005, Berkeley looked at the possibility of joining other cities in the region to become part of a joint powers authority that would purchase electricity and deliver it to its customers. And in 2005 and the following years, after having done some studies on it, they felt that the investment costs would be just too high and the risks were also too high for them to take on. There were studies done then, I recall, where I think it was in 2008, the cities of Berkeley, Emeryville, perhaps Oakland, accepted the reports from the Navigant consulting firm and realized that it was more than they wanted to do. So that was 2005 to 2008. That was before Marin Clean Energy came on board. So have things changed since, say, 2009 in terms of, you know, people's willingness or say, cities or other regions to take something like this on? What's been going on in that regard, Rafael?
I think, you know, the fact that Marin Clean Energy has been in business now has been developing a track record that it's hasn't failed, that hasn't gone belly up, that, you know, all of the worst case scenarios that its detractors were promising would happen, you know, back before it came into existence, none of them have happened. I think that's been something that a lot of cities can now look to. You know, we get a lot of calls from cities that are interested either in joining or in understanding how they can do something similar. I think also the fact that there hasn't been anything on a national or international level to address climate change in the serious way that it needs to be addressed has kind of put the onus back on cities. I'm not sure if it ever left cities, but it's really put the onus on cities to step up and be the ones to take the lead here. And a lot of cities that have undertaken climate action plans have come to realize that community choice is one of the fastest, easiest, least costly ways to dramatically reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The fact that a city like Fairfax, for example, can go deep green and overnight, essentially by paying a little bit more, reduce their greenhouse gas emissions significantly to zero again on the electric side there's not really any other way to do that. It really is. I've seen graphs of kind of all the different steps that a city could do, and going to deep green through community choice aggregation just dwarfs all the other.
All the others, good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think what Rafael is saying is absolutely true in terms of the fact that Marin Energy Authority got established, and it got established in the face of a huge effort on the part of PG&E to just crush that effort. That has really given a lot of life and expectation to other communities, and I think it's really a key factor that, David slew the giant in that particular. Is that what it?
Goliath.
Yeah, Goliath. Yeah.
Goliath, yeah.
The giant.
He's a giant.
Anyway, so that happened, and in fact, PG&E tried to kill community choice overall in June of 2010, I think it was, just about the time Marin was getting started through Prop 16. I don't know if people remember that, the big PG&E power grab, which was also defeated, right? Which also, that was another piece that showed the vulnerability of the monopoly, in the face of a very concerted public effort. But I think there have been a couple of other things as well. Number one is that the recognition of the climate crisis is really a lot stronger now than it was before. You just look at the last year with the huge weather extremes that have taken place. People are really realizing that something must be done, And that if you look at the international level, it's not happening. If you look at the national level, it's not happening. And even if you look at the state level, I mean, it's happening somewhat, but not to the extent that communities really need to do that, and communities have been planning to do that. The other stuff is that, and so for example, if you're talking about risk, right, which is, like you said, there's these studies that are done, and whenever community choice is done by these contractors, these consultants are hired to do this, they always come up with a list this long of all the risks that are involved, and we could enumerate them. It's not, because there's competition with PG&E, that's already a risk, right? So it's a risky operation in that sense. But one of the things they never talk about is what's the risk of staying and doing things the way that we're doing them now, right? And I think what's happened is that people just understand that there's a huge risk involved in not doing anything. And so the arguments about, well, this is risky, this is risky, this is risky, are now being counterbalanced in the public mind by, yeah, well, how could it be any more risky than doing things that we are doing now, which is, basically a path to extinction. That's a pretty big risk. The other thing is that the economics have been changing quite a bit as well. So back in 2008, if you looked at, for example, the price of solar photovoltaic kinds of installations, they were relatively quite a bit more expensive than they are now. So in order to be able to compete with the PG&E's prices, there's a term that's usually called grid parity, the ability to produce renewables at the same sort of price as the stuff that's already on the market. We're now in a situation where we're very, very close, and in a lot of places, to grid parity, meaning that you can actually produce solar voltaic electricity in the community for a price that's competitive with what a new natural gas-fired power plant is going to cost. So that changes the whole equation of the economics. I think the other piece, I think that's been an important piece in a lot of the new initiatives, is what I was saying before, is it's not just competing with PG&E on the level of price, but what are the benefits that can come into the community when you're actually investing in a local resource. And the Navigant study that was done in the East Bay, it really didn't touch on that very much. But those are benefits. You can't just talk about the cost of things. Everything in life is a cost-benefit trade-off. And to always talk about cost and never talk about benefits is like missing the boat entirely. You got benefits when you have people employed, when you have people benefiting from the electricity that on their own rooftops, or businesses basically being in a better competitive position because they're saving money on energy efficiency and they have solar on their rooftops and so on and so forth. That whole equation is changing fairly dramatically. So now the whole economics of it have changed in a way. So it's sort of like it's a new era, it's a new way of looking at stuff. There's a huge amount of urgency that people didn't feel before, and it's actually economically feasible in a way that it wasn't before. So, I think that's what's given rise to the fact that all over the state, in many cities, and maybe we'll talk about that later, you actually have initiatives to do community choice, to create and establish community choice programs.
So in the face of what looked like a growing number of benefits and fewer risks, I recall with the Marin program when Berkeley was considering it, the risks when Berkeley was considering it prior to Marin's establishment, there were liability issues, what would happen if it failed and we had to go back to PG&E. It was all really a monetary risk that was being considered. Marin Clean Energy seems to have dealt with a lot of that. You've figured out a way to address those risks, like the liability of failure and how the cost of that might get spread around, or I can't remember all the issues that came up, but I remember
that's a big one.
There were that many
right.
Cons and this many pros at the time.
Ensuring that the members of the Joint Powers, the member jurisdictions of the Joint Powers Authority would not be on the hook if the agency were to go belly up.
Right.
That was a big one, and that is that there is a firewall between the cities and the Joint Powers Authority, so that they are not on the hook. That was
taken care of.
Yeah.
Well, you see, since that time and now, there's been, you've addressed some of the issues of concern. And you would think that given the benefits that Al has described, and of which there are many, there'd be a great rush, to become, to organize cities to become community choice aggregators. And we are seeing in San Francisco and Sonoma County a growing interest. Other cities, Santa Cruz, I think I even heard the other day that San Diego is considering something.
San Luis Obispo.
San Luis Obispo. So it's there's some momentum building. We had that momentum here in the East Bay, and last year, as you'll recall, we actually thought that we might be able to form a jurisdiction here through East Bay Mud, our water utility. And I wonder if we might talk about that a little bit, about the efforts that were put into that locally to try and get, in our case, the Berkeley City Council and Oakland City Council to endorse that effort, and to try and convince East Bay Mud that it should at least take a look at this a little bit more closely. Al, you want to reflect on that a little bit, and why that didn't seem to garner the enthusiasm that you've described?
Well, there's two pieces to it. The first is that it wasn't until a bill passed last year, SB 790, that a special utility district like East Bay Mud could be the, quote, aggregator, or the agency that was at the center of a community choice program. And what happened was that with the passage and the signing of that law in early 2012 by the governor, what that meant is that East Bay Mud could conceivably, it's got a good reputation, it's considered a utility that's pretty responsive to the public. It has fairly good reputation as an environmental steward. It's won awards for sustainability practices. It has a lot of expertise both with water and with doing some electricity, some small hydro and other biofueled stuff. So people thought, wow, this would make it really easy to get an East Bay Mud, to get a community choice program established in the East Bay Mud if we have an existing agency that could just walk in, and it would save a lot of money and save a lot of heartache if that could happen.
Al, I'm going to break you right there. We're just going to take a few minutes, and we'll come back to what actually happened.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. We'll be back with Al and Rafael in another segment to talk about the future of community choice aggregation here in the East Bay. Thank you and good night.